My name is Margaret Hale, and at 69 years old, I never expected to fear my own child. Yet there she was, sitting on my sofa in the fading light of a winter afternoon, calmly explaining why she should receive half of the money I needed to stay alive. April had arrived with a stack of papers she'd highlighted in bright yellow, the exact shade she used back in high school when she wanted me to notice her grades. Only this time, she wanted me to notice my retirement number, $3,000 a month. To her, it wasn't enough that I had earned it through 4 decades of night shifts and aching joints. She wanted a claim on it, as if motherhood came with a lifetime financial obligation that never expired. "You don't need all of it," she said gently, the way someone speaks to a patient in a hospital bed. $1,500 a month would keep us afloat. You'd still have plenty. Her husband, Mark, nodded beside her, tapping one finger on my coffee table as if keeping time for her speech. They looked like a pair rehearsing for a presentation, not two people speaking to the woman who raised her alone after losing her father. I held my tea mug with both hands, grounding myself in the warmth. "And if I say no?" I asked. April's smile tightened. "Then we'll need to talk to someone. Maybe a lawyer, maybe a doctor. Mom, we don't think you should be managing all this by yourself. You could get taken advantage of. We just want to protect you." The words didn't match the expression. Her eyes were sharp, calculating, already imagining a world where she controlled my decisions. The threat was wrapped in concern, the kind of manipulation that grows slowly like mold behind wallpaper. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I simply stood, walked down the hallway to my small office, and pulled open the bottom desk drawer. Inside waited the black binder I had been building in secret for months, long before I admitted to myself why I was doing it. When I returned to the living room, I set it on the table between us. "You want half of my retirement," I said. "Then you should know what I've been preparing in case this day ever came." I slid the binder toward her and watched the color drain from her face as she opened it. And to understand why the binder existed at all, you'd have to go back to the morning everything began. The morning the letter arrived, the world felt quiet in a way that made my little house seem larger than it was. Winter had barely released its grip on Cedar Ridge, and the cold still lingered in the corners of the rooms, no matter how high I turned up the heat. I had finished my oatmeal and was rinsing the bowl when I heard the old mail truck lumber up the road. After 30 years in the same neighborhood, I could recognize its sputtering engine like an old friend. I dried my hands on a dish towel and stepped out onto the porch. The sun was low, the kind of pale gold that appears only on early spring mornings. I opened the mailbox and saw it immediately, a white envelope stamped with the blue seal of the Social Security Administration. My name sat in the window, printed neatly, officially, undeniably. I didn't open it right away. I held it against my chest for a moment, closing my eyes, letting the weight of it sink in. That envelope contained the answer to whether the rest of my life would feel like steady ground or thin ice. After 4 decades working hospital halls that smelled of antiseptic and heartbreak, after losing my husband to a heart attack and raising our daughter on a nurse's salary, I had trained myself never to expect too much from anything. But this envelope, this one felt like a turning point. I tore it open with my thumb, standing right beside the mailbox as a breeze tugged at my sweater. My eyes skimmed the lines until they landed on the amount. $3,000 a month. It didn't make me wealthy, but it made me safe. I exhaled slowly, a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for years. Inside the kitchen, I placed the letter on the table and smoothed it flat with my hand. Light from the window hit the page, and for a brief second, it felt like the universe was offering me a little mercy. I allowed myself small, cautious dreams, repairing the roof before it sagged another inch, replacing my lumpy mattress, Maybe buying something indulgent like real coffee beans instead of the instant jars I'd been stretching for months. And if I dared stretch the dream further, I imagined taking a short trip with Linda to the lake 2 towns over, where the water always looked like brushed steel under the morning sun. I was still staring at the letter when a knock sounded at the side door. 3 quick taps, a pause, then 2 more. Linda's unmistakable rhythm. "It's open," I called, not taking my eyes off the page. She swept in carrying a container wrapped in a kitchen towel. Even before she spoke, the smell of fresh cinnamon filled the room. "Cinnamon rolls," she announced proudly, setting the container down. "Still warm. Don't say I never treat you." She caught sight of my expression and raised an eyebrow. "What's that face? You look like someone handed you a winning lottery ticket or told you your roof finally fixed itself." "Retirement letter," I said. "It's official." She snatched the page off the table before I could react, scanning it with the efficiency of someone who has raised 3 sons and knows how to read paperwork faster than a lawyer. When she saw the monthly amount, she let out a low whistle. "Well, will you look at that?" she said, handing it back. "Margaret Hale, woman of means, $3,000 a month. That's more than some couples we know bring in together." I laughed, though something about her tone hinted at deeper concern. "It's enough," I said. "That's all I ever wanted." Linda poured us both coffee from the pot I'd forgotten on the stove. She sat across from me, stirring in too much sugar like she always did. "You told April yet?" she asked casually, though her eyes were anything but casual. I shook my head. "No, I haven't even processed it myself. I wanted a little time before it becomes complicated." She leaned back in her chair and clicked her tongue. Kids hear the word retirement and immediately think available funds, especially ones who've leaned on their parents before. "April hasn't leaned on me," I started to say, then faltered. The truth settled hard in my stomach. She had, not dramatically, not constantly, but enough that each request had chipped away at me more than I ever admitted out loud. Linda touched my hand gently. "I know you love her, but love doesn't mean handing over what you need to survive. Don't let her make you feel guilty for having something you earned." I folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope, suddenly protective of it. "I'm just afraid she'll think I'm hiding things from her." "Maybe you should," Linda said softly. "Just until you figure out what you want. Boundaries aren't secrets, Margaret. They're survival tools." I didn't want to believe her. Not then. Not yet. I wanted to think my daughter would be happy for me. I wasn't ready to imagine a future where this letter created tension instead of relief. But as Linda left and the house settled into its quiet again, I caught myself glancing at the envelope with a strange mix of hope and unease. It felt like a promise, yes, but also a warning. I just didn't know which one would come true first, and I certainly didn't know how soon the storm would arrive. A week after the retirement letter arrived, I heard April's key in the front door before she said a word. It wasn't unusual for her to let herself in, but something about the sound made my shoulders tense. I was wiping down the kitchen counters when she stepped inside, a gust of cold air following her like a shadow. She carried a bouquet of daisies, the kind that come in plastic sleeves from the discount bin near the store entrance, their petals already drooping as if they'd given up halfway home. "Thought these might brighten the place," she said, handing them over with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I thanked her and set them in the sink for the moment, noticing how restless she was. She wasn't usually fidgety, but today her hands wouldn't stay still. She rubbed her palms together, tugged at her sleeves, tapped her fingers against the table. "Rough week?" I asked gently. She laughed, sharp and humorless. "You could say that. Everything's getting worse at once. Rent's going up again. The store cut my hours, then tried to guilt me into covering shifts they didn't want to pay overtime for. Mark's company slashed benefits, and his car needs repairs we can't afford. It feels like we're trying to crawl out of a hole that keeps filling faster than we can dig. She collapsed into a chair, like her bones couldn't bear the weight anymore. For a moment, I saw my daughter as she'd been at 16, overwhelmed, scared, desperate for the world to make sense. I poured her a cup of coffee the way she used to like it, though she barely touched it. Her hands shook faintly around the mug. "Have you talked to someone?" I asked. "A doctor? A counselor?" She shook her head. "Mom, we can't afford doctors right now. We can barely afford groceries." She rubbed her forehead as if trying to erase the thoughts there. "Sometimes I feel like I'm failing at being an adult, like I missed the chapter where people learn how to manage everything." Her voice cracked slightly, and my heart clenched. I'd seen her struggle before, but she'd always found a way to bounce back. This time she looked brittle, like glass under too much pressure. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You're not failing. Life is hard for a lot of people right now." She swallowed hard, then looked at me with a mixture of fear and something else, something sharper. "I heard your retirement letter came," she said softly. "Did it?" I nodded. "It did. How much is it, if you don't mind me asking?" The question didn't surprise me. The way she asked it did. Cautious, but hungry. $3,000 a month, I said. She let out a long breath, the tension draining from her shoulders. 3,000, she repeated, almost in wonder. That's really great for you. Mom, you deserve some stability. After everything you've been through. Her words were right, but the tone was off, like she was reading lines from a script she hadn't rehearsed enough. She looked at me as if calculating something behind her eyes, and I felt a small warning bell ring quietly in my chest. "You don't have a mortgage," she continued. "Your car's paid off. Your house is small enough that utilities aren't awful. You're not drowning. You're doing okay." "I manage," I said carefully, "but that doesn't mean I'm rolling in money." "I know," she said quickly. "I know that. But compared to us," she inhaled shakily. "We're at the point where we choose which bills to pay first. We're juggling everything. If one more thing hits us, we're done." April had always been skilled at tugging at the strings of my empathy, but today felt different. Today she wasn't just asking for comfort. She was steering the conversation deliberately, as if guiding me toward a door I hadn't noticed yet. "What are you trying to say?" I asked quietly. She straightened in her chair, her hands clasped together. "Mom, if you could help us with a set amount each month, just until we get our footing, it would change everything for us. It would take away the constant panic. We could breathe again." I stayed silent, letting her continue. "We were thinking," she said, her voice dropping to a gentler tone. "Maybe half of what you get, $1,500, you'd still have more than enough for yourself. You're not extravagant. You don't travel. You don't spend much. And we'd pay you back eventually, once we stabilize." The way she said half, as if it were a perfectly reasonable suggestion, sent a chill through me. It wasn't the request that hurt. It was the expectation behind it. "April," I said slowly. "That's a lot of money." She nodded, eyes bright with urgency. "I know, but it would save us. Just for a while. Please. Mom, you've always been the one who made things okay." I felt a sharp twist in my chest. I had spent her entire childhood trying to be the solution, the safety net, the soft landing. But I was older now, and my resources were no longer infinite. "I need to think," I said. Her face tightened, disappointment flickering across it before she forced another strained smile. She hugged me before leaving, but the hug felt too tight. too possessive, too expectant. When the door closed, the house fell into a silence so deep it felt like a warning. And as I looked at the daisies she'd brought, already bending under their own weight, I sensed that something in the air had shifted, quietly but irreversibly. 2 weeks passed before I saw April again. I had spent those days trying to calm the uneasy feeling she'd left behind, telling myself I was overthinking, that exhaustion had twisted her words into something heavier. But the tension didn't fade. It sat in my chest like a stone I couldn't swallow. On a chilly Tuesday afternoon, I heard footsteps crunching over the thin frost outside. When I looked through the window, I saw April climbing out of the SUV, but she wasn't alone. Mark followed her, carrying a laptop bag and wearing the stiff, purposeful expression of a man arriving to conduct business. My stomach tightened. Visits from both of them rarely meant anything good. I opened the door before they could use their keys. The cold slipped past me into the hallway. "Mom?" April said brightly, as if we were beginning a cheerful family gathering. "We thought today would be a good time to sit down and make a plan." "A plan for what?" I asked, though dread was already curling around the edges of my thoughts. "For the finances," Mark answered, brushing past me into the living room as though it belonged to him. "We've put everything together so you can see the full picture." I followed them slowly, feeling the ground shift beneath every step. April settled on the sofa, while Mark set up his laptop on the coffee table. The screen glowed with a spreadsheet filled with red numbers and highlighted cells, as if it were evidence in a trial. "This is our situation," Mark said, tapping a column with a practiced gesture. "Rent, utilities, insurance, car repairs, the works. We're in the negative every month. It's unsustainable. Your contribution would stabilize us." "Contribution?" I repeated quietly. April leaned forward, her eyes sharp and bright. "Mom, we talked about this. You're comfortable. You don't have the financial burdens we do. And as your daughter, I'm asking for a little support. Or, not little, exactly, predictable. Something we can count on. Half of your check still makes the most sense." There was no tremble in her voice this time, no vulnerability, only expectation wrapped in the language of logic. "I never said yes," I reminded her gently. April gave a small shrug, almost dismissive. "I know. But we assumed you just needed time. And now that we've put all the documentation together, it'll be easier for you to understand why it has to be this amount." Has to be. The phrasing struck me like cold water. "And what if I still say no?" I asked. April hesitated for the briefest moment before her expression hardened. "Then we'll have to make decisions we don't want to make. You're alone here. Mom, you forget things sometimes. You leave the porch light on all night. You trusted that man who tried to sell you a fake security system. It scares us. If you're not able to fully manage things anymore, we might need to step in formally. For your safety." "For my safety," I repeated slowly. Mark cleared his throat. "There are legal avenues. Guardianship, financial oversight. Families do it all the time." A cold wave washed over me. I had seen families torn apart in the hospital over that very issue. Adult children declaring their parents incompetent to gain control of their lives. I never imagined my own daughter would speak about such things in my living room. "I don't need oversight," I said quietly. "I need respect." April's jaw tightened. "We are respecting you, but we're also protecting our future. If you don't want to help, just say that. Don't make it dramatic." Something inside me cracked, though it didn't show on my face. I straightened slowly, keeping my voice calm. "I've helped you for years," I said. "More times than you remember. But I won't sign over half my income. I won't agree to something that leaves me with nothing." April stood abruptly, her cheeks flushed with anger. "I can't believe this. After everything we've done for you—" "What exactly have you done for me?" I asked gently. She froze, unable to find an answer that matched the reality of our relationship. Mark closed the laptop with a sharp click, the sound cutting through the room like a blade. "Let's go," he said to her. "We'll figure something else out." April stared at me, disappointment and something darker shadowing her features. "We'll talk again," she said stiffly. "And Mom, please don't make this harder than it needs to be." When they left, the house fell silent except for the ticking of the wall clock. The air felt tight, as if their words were still hanging in it like smoke. 10 minutes later, Linda knocked on the door, her brow furrowed, her coat still half-buttoned. "I heard voices," she said. "Loud ones. Everything okay?" I didn't trust my voice, so I shook my head. She stepped inside, closed the door behind her, and said softly, "Then it's time we make sure you're protected too." After Linda left that afternoon, her warning echoed through my house like a draft, slipping under every doorway. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the blank surface as if answers might appear there. Instead, what returned to me was April's voice, bright with certainty, promising to protect me by taking over the very life I'd fought to keep upright. That night, I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out the black binder I had begun assembling months earlier, back when a quiet instinct told me something in our relationship was shifting in a dangerous direction. The binder held copies of every transfer I had ever made to April and Mark, each marked with dates and the brief explanations they had offered at the time. It held notes from my doctor confirming that my memory remained strong and my thinking clear. There was even a short letter from Julia, the attorney Linda introduced me to, explaining my rights in plain language so I would not be intimidated by legal threats. I did not know then whether I would ever need to show the binder to anyone, but its presence steadied me like a hand on me. 3 days later, the moment I had feared arrived. April and Mark returned in the late afternoon, the sky low and gray behind them. They did not knock this time. April simply opened the door and stepped inside, her posture stiff, her eyes set with determination. Mark followed her silently, carrying the same laptop bag he had brought before, as if we were resuming a meeting rather than a conversation between family. I invited them into the living room and sat across from them, forcing my breath to settle, even as a faint tremor stirred through my hands that evening. "Mom, we need to be realistic," April began, her tone clipped but strangely rehearsed. "You're not managing things the way you used to. You forget to lock your doors. You've trusted strangers. You leave lights on all night. We're worried." Her words hung in the air like a net she meant to tighten around me. Mark leaned forward, adding that guardianship was a practical step, something that could protect everyone involved. Hearing my own child describe control of my life as protection made a cold, sharp line form down my spine, but I kept my voice steady as I replied. "I won't surrender my independence," I said softly, "and I won't hand over my income so you can fill gaps I didn't create." April opened her mouth, but I lifted the black binder and placed it between us. The room shifted. She reached for it with uncertain fingers and turned the first page. Her face paled. On the second page, her jaw tightened. By the third, she could no longer meet my eyes. Mark took the binder next, flipping through the evidence with increasing agitation. Their narrative dissolved. My preparation, quiet and unseen, had become its own defense that day. April closed the binder slowly, as if it had grown heavier with every page. Her voice, when it finally emerged, was thin and unsteady. She said she needed time, that she hadn't realized how her requests had appeared, that she never meant to make me feel threatened. I believed pieces of her, but not the whole. Mark stood behind her, silent for once, his certainty drained away. When they left, I watched them walk to the SUV without speaking to each other. The house felt larger than before, not empty, but reclaimed. For the first time, I felt safe again.